The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
Howdy ho, Bitcoin.
Amin Rafi from Bittopia.
Hey guys.
John Light from Sovereign.
Hey folks.
Ben Ark from LN Bits.
Not start all.
And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue 1. Issue 1. Bitcoin moves towards $28,000 as the world's largest crypto extends losses. Everyone thought that the price of Bitcoin and altcoins were just going to go up forever, but everyone was wrong. They went down recently, and everyone is freaking out. Bitcoin's dropped to $28,000, and it's dropped nearly 8% after rising to 30,400 a few days ago. They're saying that the Federal Open Market Committee has increased its benchmark federal funds rate by 475 points since March. Trouble for Bitcoin? Dan Eve, why is the price of Bitcoin down? Certainly has nothing to do with the magic 8 ball.
It's down because as the best contra indicator in the world, I said it would go up last week. Or I said it would go up. Don't quote me on that ever, unless you're going against me, and then it's good to bet against me. But yeah, there's quite a bit of news, wasn't there? Like Bittrex, the SEC Bittrex suit. I'm not sure that would have spooked general Bitcoin is so much, but obviously when the rest of markets go, it's it kind of produces this bit of a cascade, right? And there was Gensler being grilled, and he was being asked about Ethereum, whether it's a security, and that was quite funny, where he was just like, well, you see, he just couldn't answer it, whether Ethereum was a security. Maybe that kind of spooked people. But again, would Bitcoin really follow Ethereum? That doesn't usually happen. Usually it's Ethereum following Bitcoin and everything else following Bitcoin. Maybe it's just general price consolidation, right? Because we had a bit of a pump. It was not too long ago, it was 20,000, just touching under 20,000. The weekend of when USDC depegged. So it's had quite a run since then. That's only just over a month or so ago. So yeah, maybe it's this kind of consolidation movement. I don't know. I'm not good with triangles and stuff like that, like these chart experts. I tried to ask ChatGPT. It doesn't comment on the price. I tried to convince it otherwise, and it still says no. But if you're having problems getting it to write your code, you just need to ask it 10 times, and it continuously says no, and it's a language model. And then if you ask it nice enough and enough times, it eventually writes the code for you. So that's one tip for ChatGPT. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. It goes up, it goes down, it goes sideways, but eventually it's moon.
ChatGPT setting a horrible example for men in our society. Amin, why has the price gone down? Is it the interest rates, the scary securities talk, or something else?
So it's two ways to approach this. One is no one knows. The second way is I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy for this to occur. You can't just have prices go up and up and up. That's when it gets scary. That's when I would pull my money out if it didn't drop for a bit. But price is no reflection of its actual function. It never has been. Most Bitcoin purchases actually occur over the counter, so that's something people forget about. There was what's the guy from Fox News? Forget his name.
Tucker
Carlson.
Yeah, Tucker said he had this theory where he's like, oh, price of Bitcoin is going up because these malware and hacks are happening around the world, and governments need to go on exchanges and buy Bitcoin to pay these hackers. And I'm like, governments don't go on like Coinbase.com and like buy Bitcoin, It's like, hey, mate, let's open up a Coinbase account for the US government. I'm like, all of these happen over the counter. It's a stupid thing to think it's going up because governments suddenly need it for malware and hacks. So that's my 2 Satoshis for that comment.
It's always difficult to figure out the price. The media is always just pulling out whatever event happened. Oh, Joan Rivers passed away. That's why the price of Bitcoin is down. John Light, is Joan Rivers responsible for the crash in Bitcoin?
Man, what a time to be alive when 30,000 to 28,000 is a crash. No, probably not. I suspect it has something to do with the fact that there are more sellers than buyers. Other than that, I don't know. I don't look at short-term price movements. I'm most focused on Bitcoin adoption, the growth in merchant adoption and adoption by long-term true Bitcoin believers. And all of the indicators that I'm looking at are up and to the right in that regard. So, you know, these short-term price fluctuations, I think they're just day traders and speculators kind of getting washed in and out of the market, and it's just noise. It doesn't really have any, I think, real meaningful effect on Bitcoin long-term, or certainly not on Bitcoin's fundamentals and the real value that it brings to society. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
I think it was on a recent episode of Mad Bitcoins. He said, if the price of Bitcoin went down $2,000 back in my day, that would be it for the price of Bitcoin. It'd be over. Ben Ark, what do you think about this $2,000 swing in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I agree. It's just day traders. And it's exactly why you shouldn't day trade, because even if the general value of Bitcoin is going up, which is significant, I think we all know that, then if you do day trade, then you can just get wiped out by some random, hiccup in the market, because there's more, like say, more sellers than buyers, and then it pushes the price down. And particularly in Bitcoin, it's such a thin layer of actual people buying and selling Bitcoin, which moves the price like, the little ripples, and then the general current obviously moves in another direction. But Bitcoin's such a strong place at the moment. It's all the Nostar integration, people using Bitcoin on Nostar. There's like there's going to be a slight lag that those people will be using zaps, and they'll get a little bit of lightning. They'll be zapping each other on some of these Nostar social platforms. I know most of them are Bitcoiners, but it's also pulling in a lot of non-Bitcoiners. And then after that lag, they'll be like, well, I probably should buy myself some of this Bitcoin. It's pretty cool. I can send these microtransactions to support tweets or whatever. So I think the Nostar impact is going to be huge for Bitcoin. It could easily get it to rally up to like a couple of $100,000 a Bitcoin, let alone all the other reasons we should be all using Bitcoin. So yeah, this is exactly why people shouldn't day trade. It's one of those little hiccups in the market, which is really meaningless, like unpredictable, comes and goes. Just buy some Bitcoin, hold it for a decent period of time.
And now, showing that you have true powers over the market, I'll ask you guys to predict against the Bitcoin predictor ball, the greatest source of all truth in Bitcoin history. Dan, Eve, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Higher.
Amin Rafi, higher or lower?
I'm going to go up. They say never short, so I'm going to go long.
John Light, it's been all positivity so far. Higher or lower?
1 BTC is 1 BTC.
Oh, a push. The worst answer. Ben Ark, higher or lower?
Lower, but yeah, just for a tiny period of time and then back up. I mean, yeah, whatever, don't matter. Yeah, lower.
Lower, because someone has to be contrarian, right? We can't all be positive. Here we go. Will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? Very doubtful. Very doubtful. The ball is pessimistic. So there you go. The ball has spoken. Moving on to issue 2, U.S. crypto exchange Coinbase secures Bermuda license. We thought that Brian Armstrong was just threatening the United States, saying that Coinbase might leave. But now it's a real possibility, with Coinbase setting up a Coinbase International exchange that sounds like it might finally be able to compete with the likes of Binance and others who've been running stateless crypto exchanges, even offering zero fees. Amin Rafi, what do you think about Brian Armstrong and Coinbase's decision to perhaps flee the United States because of a lack of regulatory clarity?
So my view on Coinbase is it's got a huge link to the intelligence agency, and I'm not a fan of any centralized exchange. So as far as I care very little about centralized exchanges. So as far as like they're moving to Bermuda, I think they should do that anyway, regardless of what's going on. Being able to compete with Binance, maybe. Binance controls the market quite strongly, and I think it's interesting. These news about centralized exchanges and their ties. I don't know. I'm a fan of decentralized protocols, so I don't care is the real response.
Of course, if Coinbase was a CIA operation, they'd be losing power by pushing them out of the country and weakening them. John Light, what do you think about Coinbase and the possibilities of Bermuda? Kind of reminds me of the Bahamas and someone else down there.
Yeah, when Coinbase polycule. But I don't have a very strong opinion about this either. I work on a project that builds a decentralized exchange on the Rootstock Bitcoin sidechain. I'm an advocate of non-custodial or self-custodial decentralized exchanges. To watch the centralized exchanges kind of wriggle and squirm under regulatory pressure, I mean, it's I think to be expected. I think everybody expected that at some point there would be some sort of challenge from regulators to Bitcoin exchanges or crypto exchanges, broadly speaking, especially these exchanges that are trading so many different tokens of dubious quality. I think they're just kind of setting themselves up for that kind of like face-off. My understanding is that this particular showdown with the regulators was driven by Coinbase's desire to open a derivatives exchange, and that of course is pretty heavily regulated activity, and so they were bound to face some sort of challenges. I do think it is kind of strange that they haven't been able to do it in the US. Like there are other derivatives exchanges in the US. It's just, the question is why can't Coinbase specifically do it? I think that's an interesting question, but overall, I think that this is just, more positive news for like decentralized and truly like censorship resistant exchanges that, don't have to worry about this kind of pressure because they can't get shut down. It's just running autonomously on chain or in peer-to-peer protocols, and it just can't get shut down. So that's the kind of thing, protocols that I'm focused on, that I'm most interested in. And I wish the entrepreneurs in the space the best of luck, but I don't know if that route is really going to be the best and most sustainable route long term. So I would advocate for people to look at decentralized exchanges and truly decentralized and censorship resistant protocols instead of trusted centralized custodial intermediaries.
We've talked before on this show about the idea of kind of good times for Bitcoin and bad times for Bitcoin. And there was this kind of great period where you could transfer money from your bank account to your Coinbase account. It was really easy. And it's also really easy to look at it and say, that will all go away. If they decide to get rid of Bitcoin, all that will be left, like John's saying, is these decentralized option, meeting people in person. We've seen local Bitcoins go down. Paxful recently went down. They are trying to cut off a lot of those things that were made. And what will likely happen is a more decentralized version of those things will be launched if we really need them, which we might. Ben Ark, it's interesting to see Silicon Valley's star Coinbase start to fade here. They were doing everything the right way. They were going to be the regulations guys, the ones that got in there early with a monopoly and shaped the regulations. Now it seems like he's going on the run. He's putting on the pirate mask, as we talked about. What do you think, Ben?
I mean, they've probably just given up. Like maybe there is some Bitcoin bias in the US, and that's why they haven't been able to become like regulated in the way they want. So he's just whatever, just give up. We're losing money, fighting this unwinnable fight, this unwinnable battle with US government. And there's jurisdictions which are far more like regulatory friendly, which is what we always say, and we've said a bunch of times on this group, that the countries which are friendly to Bitcoin, or they have clearer rules, and they're probably not going to shift those rules as flippantly as someone like the US might. They're going to be the ones who capitalize on this huge industry which is growing, which is I mean, I don't know how much of their operations will be moving to Bermuda, I suppose, but people are still going to benefit from it, and that'll just be a pattern which we'll just continue to see. And I'm sure as Coinbase, other companies will follow suit from Coinbase. And I think, well, if Coinbase is going, I might as well go as well, and then they'll leave as well. So it's a shame that the US is going to leak that talent in the industry. But yeah, absolutely, we should all be concentrating on the real juicy bit, which is the decentralized exchanges. You said you're working on a decentralized exchange on Rootstock, on the Bitcoin sidechain. That's really interesting, John. I just wanted to ask, could you tell me a little bit about the project? It sounds really cool.
Sure. So it's called Sovereign, and we have an automated market maker smart contract that's been deployed to Rootstock. So users can deposit liquidity, and then other traders can come along and trade against that liquidity, Bitcoin for stable coins and other assets that people choose to list on the DEX. And then we also have a borrowing and lending facility where people can, again, deposit assets to lend Bitcoin or stable coins and other assets. And then users can come along and like combine the trading and the borrowing and lending to do margin trading. So they can trade up to 5x leverage on margin. So all of that is happening like on chain. Yeah, it works. It's been running for a couple of years now. Does I think 1 million, 2 million or something like that in volume a day. So it's still relatively small, but it's been working and slowly growing. So
we seem to have lost Ben, but when he comes back, we'll see what he thinks about that. Let's go to Dan. Eve, is the United States at risk of losing their tech future? Are we finally getting to the point where they're cracking down on these, legitimate Boy Scout following the rules entrepreneurs?
Well, they have been a company that have they've been friendly to regulation, right? They've been cozying up with the regulators, and it seems like trying to do the right thing in the US. So it's kind of a big deterrent for businesses wanting to start your business in the US if the biggest company, the biggest US based trading company can be hounded continuously by the SEC. And the recent one was about staking, right? And how they got told off for staking mechanisms, and obviously whether you they obviously have loads of shit coins on there, but pretty much every exchange does nowadays. You can't avoid it, right? Because if your customers want it, you're going to supply it to them. But it's that classic example of regulation to evacuation, right? You get regulated too heavily, you get fed up with the markets, as Ben said, they're kind of probably given up, right? Imagine sleeping at night thinking any service that you have is going to be attacked by the regulators. And why bother focusing so much of your efforts with regulation when there's all these absolutely insane, obvious scams out there that aren't being chased as much as, say, given the time of day from regulators as Coinbase are. You think about like how much effort's gone into finding one coin, still probably a lot less than Coinbase and these all these other crazy scams out there. Yet legitimate businesses that have tried to be good with regulation, like Bittrex as well, another one, they're being targeted. And that's kind of I wouldn't want to start a business in a place where you know that you're just going to get spanked every time that you try and even make a good move or whatever the right move is. But one thing that was interesting I didn't realize that in that article is that that in March, derivatives trading volumes, March alone, by the sounds of it, derivatives trading volumes on major exchanges hit $2.8 trillion, which is a huge amount, right? So it's a huge business to be getting into. So why stay in a market that is so difficult, as John said, to why not launch derivatives in the US? Go and do it elsewhere. You're not going to please anyone by doing it in the US. They're only going to look at you even harder and under more scrutiny. So it just makes perfect sense to sleep better at night and be in a location, set up in a location that's going to be a bit easier on you than US regulators.
Well, also, as John was saying, they have those large mansions in the Bahamas as well as Bermuda. So, never too late for Brian Armstrong to branch out and join a polycule. But as Dan was saying, I think this goes well into the exit question. Bittrex, the U.S. exchange, has recently sent me that all too familiar email. It's time to withdraw all your funds. We're getting the heck out of your country. Do you think I'll get a similar email from Coinbase? Amin Rafe, is Coinbase going to leave the United States? Yes or no?
I believe so, yes.
They'll leave. They won't go down with the country fighting the regulation. John Light, will Coinbase leave?
I don't think they'll leave completely. I think they'll probably still continue to do spot trading here, but yeah, they will set up some other business entities outside of the US, like maybe staking, maybe derivatives and other things that the regulators are not, cooperating with them on here in the US.
I do love the idea of them losing kind of like their virginity here. Like Coinbase is like, we're better than those other exchanges. We don't do those things. We don't work in the dirty, sneaky countries. We work in the US. And now they're like, we aren't making enough money. We need to go to that sneaky country. We need to do those weird derivative things. Dan, Eve, while Ben gets set up, will Coinbase leave the US?
Well, one move could be, I agree with John, I don't think they'll leave completely. One kind of smart move for them might be, if they're really that worried about, about regulation, since Genzo, again, recently was grilled about Ethereum being a security, he confirmed that Bitcoin is not a security. So what if, plot twist, Coinbase went Bitcoin only in the US? They were like, get the hell out. Sell your shitcoins now. Well, not sell your shitcoins, but transfer them out now with Bitcoin only in the US. And that could get them back in the good books of some maxis.
It will be like when Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple. Everyone will cheer. Ben Ark, you're back. What do you think? Will Coinbase leave the United States? Yes or no?
No, I think the US is going to become a little bit clearer regulatory. John, I'm so gutted I missed that explanation as to your project, but it gives me a good excuse to watch the video back afterwards. So I'll watch the whole thing afterwards. But yeah, cool to see that you're building a decentralized exchange. That's clearly the answer, and I'm very glad to see people using Rootstock. It's great.
All right, we're going to move on to the middle of the show. Check out madbitcoins.com. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary today. 10 years ago today, made a little Mad Bitcoin show. And here we're going to watch the first one. It's only 30 seconds. I don't have a microphone. I'm kind of yelling at the camera, but here it is. 30 seconds of Mad Bitcoins on April 21st, 2013. Good morning, Bitcoins. I'm Fiat Currency, and here are today's Mad Bits. Butterfly Labs actually ships something. Working. Giga hash in the wild. That's why I've sent my money to Butterfly Labs and I'm in line with everyone else. Can you feel the momentum? Giga hash in the wild. Buy Bitcoins today. Mad Bitcoins. So there you go. I didn't just recommend that you buy Bitcoin. I said that you should buy Bitcoins, multiple Bitcoins. So, and
that's amazing. I didn't even realize I was here for such a special day. So happy 10th anniversary, Mad Bitcoins. Did you ever get that Butterfly Labs ASIC?
It's pretty interesting. Eventually, I did get it. But it was so sad because as I show in the next episodes and stuff, it's like the difficulty goes straight up. Something about my timing there in April, like Mad Bitcoin's kind of joined for the giga hash moment of Bitcoin mining, where for a couple weeks you're like, if I could get this box for $300, it'll make $300 a week. Like I'll clear in a month. I'll be in the rolling, and then by the time the box comes, the disaster with the company, everyone else in the market getting giga hash at the same time. I think that we did get a small Butterfly Labs box, the little itty bitty one, and we ran it for I don't know 6 months until it covered its costs. And then I think it went on eBay. Sadly, I thought we should have kept one, but yeah, it was tough. It was all your predictions on your legal pad for your mining business or whatever it would be, all went down, all lost money. Like mining was loud and interrupted all my movies, but was never successful at money making. But Ben Ark, what do you think about Mad Bitcoins?
I think it's spectacular that it's been 10 years, and congratulations. And Mad Bitcoins, whoever that guy is, I mean, like, he had such a huge impact on Bitcoin. Like, there was so little content out there back then. To see this, I don't know who it is, but I mean, could be Satoshi, whatever. This guy just appears and then produces all these videos. Occasionally produces a video now. It's all very impressive. But no, absolutely, it's a real momentous occasion that we're 10 years from Mad Bitcoin's first video. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next 10 years, see where we are.
It was pretty amazing. I remember no one was talking about Bitcoin at all. Like I'd read about it a few years ago. I didn't get into it then. And everyone has that tragic story. But around 2013, I had on my list of like January things to do. So by the time it gets to April and the price has gone from like 30 to 300 or 30 to 100 or something disastrous like that, I was like, well, it's finally time. I give up. I'm going to get in, because I was like, oh, I should have got it at $1. I should have got it before $1. It was all these things. And then once I was in, it was like, well, all my $1,000 in savings is gone. And no one is talking about this. And I think it's just the greatest thing. I was so excited to read about the possibilities and think about how kind of like an Aikido move, something small like the Bitcoiners could flip something large like the Federal Reserve or the state, or the way money was done, or even just having people send money across the internet for cheap, even just getting rid of Western Union, where if you're sending money back home, it's not eating up all your money, especially kind of the poorest people who are sending money back home. And as well as just from like a artistic perspective, I was really excited by the idea of the QR code, and that on the end of the Mad Bitcoins episodes, there's a QR code, and whoever you are in the whole world, you could scan that and you could send like $10 to Mad Bitcoins. And I thought that was just the neatest idea, because I knew YouTube took a cut. YouTube, gets on your butt for the taxes, and everyone should pay them, of course, but it's very complicated if you only make a couple $100 to pay the $3 in taxes, but you should all do it. But this crazy Bitcoin thing just jumps over that. So if you had it in an artwork or a poster on a wall, someone could support that cause, someone could help that person with that QR code just because of Bitcoin. And then now later we see with the Lightning Network as well, it's like a new way to send this Bitcoin. Dan, Eve, what do you think of the Matt? Go ahead, Ben. You want to talk? Or
no, I was just going to say it's really interesting just having my Bitcoins on the right, consistently on the right side of history, because obviously a lot happened between then and now, and a lot has changed. But I think one of the most important things is my Bitcoins was always on the right side of history, and for a lot of people, like me, I was a fan of the shows. It was like a guiding light to help give information, give good information, which we could form opinions around and then make the right choices. So yeah, it's great.
Well, I felt very much like in the beginning, like if I didn't report on it, that it didn't happen. And so I didn't really watch like other people's
obligation.
Yeah. And also I wanted to give my kind of spin, my sarcastic take, or with Bitcoin, usually my positive take. And one of the big things about Bitcoin I wanted to do is I wanted to be positive about something. So many times you're like the government or the secret conspiracy or whatever, and they're dragging you down, and it's impossible to do anything because the enemy is so everywhere. And with Bitcoin, it was like, no, everyone can do a small thing. Like getting one person into it is a success. Talking to the taxi driver or the Uber or leaving someone a tip, all these things are a success. And they're also just
buying the stuff because you're taking the money out of the banks. Like it's it's the ultimate contribution to Bitcoin is just getting some. You know?
Well, and that's what they would do too. If they disagreed with something, they'd take their money out of it. And we have the chance now to have an option, to have a plan B, as they say. And like you're saying, Ben, I remember during the scaling crisis that I kind of felt like Bitcoin was going over this waterfall. I was like, what's going to happen? Why are we going over this cliff? Like, are we sure we want to do this? We're going to fracture the community. And I kind of went there and I was going on Twitter and I was just kind of hassling people, trying to get them on my show every day. And I did that kind of series of shows where it was like an emergency in Bitcoin. And I talked to Roger Ver and I got, his full side of the story. He was having trouble using it as a merchant. And it seems that he could have gone on to the Lightning Network and had success there, but he didn't see that succeeding. So he wanted to go his own way with the Bcash. And then I talked to all the other technical people and they had their own perspectives. But it was really nice to try to put the pause button on Bitcoin there and try to get those interviews together. And then by the end of the week, I was pretty much, there's no uniting these communities. Roger Ver and his group wants to do what they want.
That was, no 2x movement came out of my Bitcoins and the Bitcoin group and things, didn't it? For most people, I think for most of us, that's when Bitcoin actually had value, when it beat the big corporate interests, and we were like, okay, this thing is, it is censorship resistant. It can't be controlled, and that's when it really got interesting. So, yeah, on the right side of history again.
Well, and it was so unlikely that we would beat them. First with the UASF, getting that in there over what we now think to be the wishes of Bitmain and Jihan and the ASIC boost issue. And then the second thing where the corporations were like, oh, well, now we're just going to double the blocks because we feel like it. And everyone was like, nah, maybe we shouldn't do that. We should wait some more, be scientific. And it was interesting, Ben. I remember when we went to the Bitcoin Paris type event. I forget which one it was, but it was fantastic. All these other people were into No 2X as well. And they had stickers and they were talking about, and they put it in their presentations. They're like, by the way, No 2X. And it was like this sudden idea where it wasn't just us like at home being like, maybe we shouldn't do that, just being cautious. It was all these like kind of serious researchers, guys, the programmers, the people actually involved. And I think that really united and helped the community. Dan, Eve, what do you think about Mad Bitcoins? You remember your first time?
Oh, indeed. It was like I can't remember if I'm pretty sure I watched you first before I listened to the first two I listened to were yourself and Trace Mayer when it was Run to Gold, and it was back when there was no media, like even then there was just no media coverage, right? There was every now and then you'd hear, not even a mainstream news, it would be like some side news outlet that would cover something that was nefarious Bitcoin related, but you couldn't get news from anywhere. So yeah, it was just great to hear a refreshing news source and something that was really interesting as well. That you're hooked in by the psychedelic backgrounds and the hat. And if you'd have listened to Tom on that very first day when it was on the 21st of April 2013, it was $123, which would currently put you about $27,170 up. So kudos for anyone that bought at that time. I went down the same route as you. I bought Butterfly Labs, I bought Blocker up to Cubes, I bought all sorts of stuff. I tried to get in on the Jupiter miners. Is it Jupiter miners? But KNC ended up buying a load of script miners for Litecoin and others. Flower Tech was the one that I got hooked into. And it was crazy days. And then ended up building a little mining farm out of GPUs because I got stitched on every single ASIC I bought. And exactly the same thing, had a massive spreadsheet, all these calculations, how much profit I was in. As I was waiting for it, I was like, oh, this profit, amazing. And then it got here and it was difficulties up 50x. I'm no, oh, savage. All those dreams just fluttered away in a butterfly's the flap of a butterfly's wing. But yeah, incredible that you've been doing 10 years producing content. Absolutely amazing. And yeah, I was just proud to be part of the World Crypto Net as well, which is also must be nearly 10 years as well, surely.
Yeah, it's about 9 years for the World Crypto Network. And actually, I think the Bitcoin group started before the World Crypto Network. So we'll probably hit the Bitcoin group's 10th anniversary pretty soon.
Oh, right. What episode is it as well? What's the episode?
Oh, this is 355, I think.
Wow, 355.
and those are weekly. So those are hard to get with 52 weeks in the year. And I think one of the big successes, not that Mad Bitcoins caused it, but I think we all caused it together by, talking about Bitcoin, tell everyone about Bitcoin, all the podcast, everything else, is that now Bitcoin is regularly used as a joke on late night talk shows. They're like, da 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 da, Bitcoin, ha 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 ha. Like everyone knows what it is. Like it used to be, too technical or drug money, and it wouldn't be a joke like that. Now it's like Bitcoin that people lose money on, Bitcoin, that weird currency that I don't know how to use. It's too confusing, which is a much better place for us to work from to try to build it up. But yeah, they do always. And I've seen it just casually, just, it's not like they invested in Bitcoin. So I think that's a huge victory for the whole space. Amin, do you have any memories of Mad Bitcoins or anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, for sure, man. So I got into crypto in 2013. I remember buying the first Bitcoin for 50 Australian dollars. And I was like, this is Warcraft money, man. I just got scammed. What is this one on my screen? I want my cash back. But then, yeah, I went and read the white paper properly and got involved a lot more proactively and learned a lot more. And you were definitely one of the main people that was allowing people to, in a digestible manner, receive the information in regards to what's going on and how to be involved and all the other exciting things that was going on. So I definitely remember that show, and it was just different, there was a lot of people that were involved from a developer's perspective, and it was boring, man. It was really boring to hear a lot of like the dev talks and all this stuff that they were just like preaching to the choir, and it wasn't very like inclusive of other people who didn't have a technical mind. And your show definitely did a great job in terms of being able to make it fun and make it interesting and get people involved in that way. So I always do appreciate that. And also seeing you at the Hackers Congress and being able to be a part of that. And, it's been a great journey for me personally as well. Just like all the OGs that got into it and where we are at now. And yeah, with the mining, I had my own pool not for Bitcoin. I had like several pools for different cryptos. One was X13, which turned into Darkcoin and Dash. So yeah, it takes you back. When you took me back to when I saw that date, 2013, I'm like, damn, a lot has changed. Now there's all these people talking about centralized exchanges. I just want to tell you something which you might find crazy. Like I do workshops and courses on cryptos, and I have a lot of students when I tell them, you can buy Bitcoins or cryptos in person. They're like, what? You can buy it in person with cash? I'm like, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's how it started, like that's how it's designed to be. They're like, wow. Like I'm being very genuine here. Like it's not even a joke. They're like, where do I find these people? I'm like, well, meetups, there's people meeting up. They're like, there's people that have meetups for Bitcoin and crypto. I'm like, yeah, man, go on to like meetup.com or Facebook or ask around. You'll find the right groups. And they're like, wow. Like it blows them away, because they've been so focused on what the garbage that comes out of TV and like what you said, oh, they didn't buy a Bitcoin. Like, it's like who's the clown here? But yeah, it's good to feed them that information. I just thought after 10 years people would have figured out this stuff, but it really shows you how little people are informed of what's really going on and how to get in touch with it and how to obtain it without going through centralized exchanges. And once you go through it, and as I do with my students, they just like never look at a centralized exchange again. I had like two ladies in their 40s and 50s who literally found like a couple of Bitcoin ATMs around Sydney, and they drove just to like use it. They're like, we will never use a centralized exchange again after knowing how it all works. So I'm like, good on you, ladies, go get it. But yeah, good on you. And
not your keys, not your coins.
Yeah, not your key, not your coins, man. And yeah, congratulations, 10 years. That's a long time to be on the front line. So good on you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think one of the other things we're still working on is that you can buy less than one Bitcoin. You can get like a 0.0 or 0.001 or all these kind of things. People they still don't have that.
That's right. I thank you for bringing that up. They're like, no, I can't afford Bitcoin. It's too expensive. I'm like, you buy $100 worth. They're like, what? You can do that? I'm like, yeah, for sure. You can buy like 10 cents if you want, but it's not going to work.
Well, I know where the idea comes from, like stocks or gold bars or whatever. You have to buy the whole one. But even now with stocks, they have programs where you can buy like $100 of Apple or whatever if you don't have it for the full share. But it is really funny. Like Amin was saying, I kind of having John here is great too, because we used to go to the San Francisco Bitcoin meetup together. And it feels kind of like we went to college together, and then we all went away in different places, and then the crazy COVID happened. We all stayed home and nobody got to meet up. It's like I haven't seen everybody in 3 years and all this stuff because of just how the conferences went and how the COVID went. But it was great, as Amin was saying, to get into the Mad Bitcoins because there was no kind of humor in it. There was no lightness to it. And at first I got kind of pushback. I got kind of negative comments. So they're like, Bitcoin's a very serious thing and you're being, unserious and you're not being mathy enough and you should go slower. And why are you using a weird voice and why you have a weird costume and you shouldn't have this. And it would be great if you just did it like a normal newscaster. And I was like, no, I'm trying to break through. I'm trying to get it in a different group. And that's what's so interesting is that did kind of happen. We went from like the libertarians and the cypherpunks to kind of normal computer people to kind of normal people. And then to see, as you guys were talking about earlier, how like the NFTs and the art movement brought in all these people. And now we're seeing, as Ben was saying, through Nostr and being able to just share information, just notes and other stuff generally could bring in our next round of users. And our earlier rounds of users, they don't even necessarily like the new rounds. They're like, I don't like the art people, or I don't like the notes people that just want to send data around, or especially when it gets combined where the art people are now, stacking their notes data in the blockchain as Bitcoin stamps or Bitcoin ordinals. Now there's a whole nother debate going on. But I think all of this is great. I think it was great to add this fun of Mad Bitcoins to the Bitcoins. And I also think it was great things like Let's Talk Bitcoin that also started around the same time, that was more serious and that was more like call-in radio and more serious stuff. All of those voices together and all the new voices got us where we are. So I think it's great that everyone has that perspective. And thank you guys for responding about Mad Bitcoins. We did this kind of impromptu. And my goal tomorrow is to get up early and try to watch some of the old episodes, maybe hang out with some people if someone's around. But it's really fun. We're going to watch some old episodes over on the Mad Bitcoins channel. So check that out. But now back to the Bitcoin group, on to issue 3.
I honestly think that was the most important story, to be honest. But there we are. Let's carry on.
Most important. Come on, man. We can't pat ourselves on the back all day long. Only sometimes. All right. Moving on to issue 3. Bitcoin Lightning Network is 1,000 times cheaper than Visa and MasterCard, according to data. Yes, Bitcoin is finally starting to flip Visa and MasterCard thanks to the Lightning Network. We always used to talk about this before by how Bitcoin was too slow, it didn't do enough transactions, and that the transactions cost too much. Now the Lightning Network seems to have perhaps solved both of these problems. Let's go to John Light. What do you think about the new data that the Bitcoin Lightning Network is cheaper than Visa?
It doesn't surprise me. I think, Visa and MasterCard have virtual monopolies in their domain, and they're centralized, and there's a lot of friction and regulatory red tape in what they're doing. So it's no surprise that their costs far exceed those of a decentralized peer-to-peer free market for payments liquidity that we have with the Lightning Network. But it's good to see that intuition backed up with real data now, and it'll be interesting to see if we can keep that competitiveness as the Lightning Network grows.
It would be great to get back into the whole Bitcoin adoption thing. I watched some old Mad Bitcoins episodes getting ready for the anniversary. And sadly, a lot of the time I talk about going to restaurants and using Bitcoin. And I get a lot of flack from the Bcashers and such. They're like, oh, we can still use our Bitcoin at restaurants. It would be great to see the Lightning Network rise to that level. Ben, Ark, now that it's cheaper, are companies going to get in it? They're going to figure out they pay to use Visa. They only get their money at the end of the day. It's a settlement system, whereas Lightning Network, boom, instantly, hardly any fees, could change the world, like we used to say about Bitcoin?
I think it's probably for use cases beyond Visa and what the Visa network is capable of. So I don't know if you remember when the Lightning Network was kind of a concept and it was being worked on. And yeah, the Bcash, as they would say, it's all the big blockers or whatever, say it's vaporware. When it was more academic, and there were all these conversations about how many transactions Bitcoin could do. So like Visa network could do 27,000, I think it was the number, 27,000 transactions a second, whereas Bitcoin could do 7 transactions a second. And it was like, okay, clearly this isn't going to scale. We need something better. And then the Lightning Network started, and people started running nodes, and there were some node implementations, and it was buggy and hacky, and people were doing it for altruistic reasons, for geeky reasons, much like when they first engaged with Bitcoin early on. And then going back to our previous topic of my Bitcoins, when I did that Rabble interview on the World Crypto Network in Costa Rica, this is the guy who employed Jack Dorsey. And he worked on a lot of free and open source projects in the past. He's kind of like the free and open source hacky guy in Twitter, trying to keep it free and open source, but obviously that's an impossible mission. And we had a good conversation about how important the social aspect is of free and open source. And if you can have some great free and open source project, but with no social movement, then it doesn't get any traction. No one uses it, and it's a shame because it's a great technology, like something like Liquid might come to mind. I always feel there should be a better social movement around the Liquid network by Blockstream. But with the Lightning Network, we had Fulmo, and was probably the main driver, which is the German lot, the sort of hacker German lot. They really pushed the Lightning Network. They started the Lightning Hack Days, the Lightning conferences. So many projects came out of them, like Ellenbits came out of the Lightning Hack Day, and all my projects came out of the Lightning Hack Day as well. And it was really that social movement which made the technology become successful. And it's just as with Bitcoin, this is why content creators or anyone who is trying to get people engaged with Bitcoin, and especially in a fun way as well, why it was so important, why my Bitcoins were so important. But now to see Bitcoin, the Lightning Network being used and its original use cases. So Visa network can do 27,000 transactions a second. The Lightning Network now, it's surpassed Visa's throughput capacity or transaction capacity, and because of that, we can do tiny little transactions. We can be sending fractions of a penny, which is what people are doing on Nostar. Currently, they're zapping each other and they're sending these tiny little amounts of Bitcoin and tiny little amounts of value, which Visa just can't do. And I actually think that this is the way in which Lightning Network will be adopted more by different industries. Is they'll be like, wow, this opens up all these use cases now, which we just can't do on Visa because Visa technology is just not enough. Like we can't do enough transactions. They cost too much. Like we need to do really more than $1 to be able to make it financially viable on Visa. And I think and so pay as you go content, paywall content, that's sort of stuff, and zaps and those sorts of applications, a bunch of other applications people haven't even thought of yet. I think that'll be the real driver into people using Lightning Network. But it's fascinating now because for such a long time, Lightning Network was just hobbyists, and a bunch of, some services you could get, you pay for your hosting or whatever online, but there's some real things you can do with your Bitcoin on Lightning Network now, which is great to see, and long may it continue.
I think a lot of younger Bitcoiners look back and they're like, why would you ever spend Bitcoin? Why would you even tell people to spend Bitcoin? This is disastrous. Even donating $10 to Mad Bitcoins, I've had people get mad at me. That $10 is worth $100 now, and I sent it to you, and whatever. If you didn't rebuy, you have to rebuy. But I think what we're talking about here is having too many transactions in the blockchain. And it's because of these people who were sending it around, who were spending it, who were talking to their taxi drivers and their Uber drivers, that it became too popular, that the programmers then had to make the Lightning Network. They had to look for scaling solutions. If no one had ever used it, it never would have done that. And I think we're going to see the same thing with the Lightning Network, where people need to start using it more. And God forbid it gets full, But if the Lightning
Well,
Network
it
was
can't. No,
full,
this is the thing. It
well,
can't
then
get full. It just
you
can't
can't full,
get
they'd
full.
have to make a second one, or it just get too
No,
big.
no, no. Just guess. It got infinite capacity. You just open more channels. The biggest, the biggest limitation.
I've
of the
heard
Lightning
that
Network-
before, and then I get down to Excel sheet number 255, and it stops saving and it throws away the rest of your data without telling you about
No,
it.
no, the like this, it just scales infinitely. But what you need is to be able to make channels.
The same thing. I hear that from Apple iPhoto. They're like, it holds all your photos. I'm like, what about 100,000 photos? What about 200,000?
No, this is different. But the biggest limitation is opening channels, opening closing channels. But that'll be fixed with channel factories or whatever. Yeah. But sorry.
But yeah, I do think.
Well, channel factories don't allow you to open new channels with people, right? You can only open channels with the people you already have channels open to. But for onboarding a new user to the Lightning Network, you still need an on-chain transaction, right?
Yeah, it's still potentially fixable problem. It's just finding a solution and then being able to. And we have Taproot now. We can do a whole bunch of things we couldn't do before on Bitcoin. Someone will find a solution for that problem, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, we're back in the same cycle where we need people to use it, people to buy and sell things for Lightning, and to cause the network to be expanded, and we need people to talk about it, not just at a Mad Bitcoins or a podcaster level, but just everyone that sees a Mad Bitcoins or this show or whatever, and then goes and talks to their friend, talks to their brother about it, tells someone else, forces them to buy $100 in Bitcoin, like holds the computer to their head, whatever's necessary. It spreads the word, it spreads the network. And now, Lightning Network is a whole new challenge. It's a whole separate thing. It's Bitcoin, 2, whatever you want to say.
Can I add to that if I may?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, cheers. So, you said something interesting, which is like, it started off with, hey man, you can go to this restaurant or bar or wherever, and you can use it, cryptos or Bitcoin, to pay for things, and give it to people so they know how to use it. I know so many people I can look back who after many years came back, they're like, hey, remember that $100 in Bitcoin you sent me? It's worth like a couple of grand now. And so it's beautiful to see these things, but somewhere along the line, and I say this as part of some of the videos I do, people's minds got hijacked, and they started believing in this concept of huddle and don't spend it, and they're like, and I think it's such a toxic mentality to have, because it really does damage in terms of adoption and people being able to use it and actually learn to use it with other people and pay for things. And I never understood why people, I think it's been hijacked. People's minds have been hijacked rather than their actual desire to hold on to it. And this is why, because there's no reason why you can't just have like an allocated amount that you use for spending or for purchases, and you have still your savings account. It's like money, yeah. But there's so many different assets in life that you can just kind of be like, oh, hold on to it, and one day it will go up. You're just going to be sitting around, you're 30 years old, you haven't or 40, 50, 60, whatever, and you haven't seen anything, and you're just like, thank God I hold on to my crypto. It's like, well, did you do anything with it? No, but I do have a lot of crypto. It's like, I remember getting into it in 2013, 14, 15, before it became infested with people that just came in for the money aspect. And it was used to do beautiful things. Like I used majority of mine to travel and speak at events and share the knowledge with people. And it was a more blissful period of that crypto era. Whereas now it's just, it's changed a lot. So thanks for bringing up the concept that people need to use it. People need to really go out and use it. And I really love seeing people like go and find restaurants or bars or wherever where they can spend it. So it's fun. It's just like cleanse your hand of that blood money.
I definitely think it's a great idea for people to use it. Also for them to have multiple wallets, like you said, multiple accounts, like have a long-term, life savings, have a normal savings, have a spending money one. I think a lot of people were like, they kept it all in one account, and then they felt moved to donate to somebody, and they're like, oh, here's your 0.1. And they're like, I just sent away my life savings, my savings, and my donation money all at one time. And then if they don't rebuy almost immediately on whatever platform you want to rebuy, they lose money or they gain money or whatever, and they get all mad about it. But like Amin was saying, I remember my first time kind of watching a Bitcoin transaction on like a YouTube or an explainer in the very early days, and it was all command line. And I was like, oh yeah, this isn't going to work, guys. I mean, I can see where the value is coming from here. I can understand what's going on, but everyone else is going to think this is a trick, and they're not going to get your Warcraft money here. Your 0.00, you're sent, you sent it to yourself. But when you actually use it yourself for the first time and you get that wallet and you send, $1 or $10 or whatever from one wallet to the other, and you realize that it happened without an intermediary, with like a bunch of random intermediaries, right? Which is better because they can be trusted, whereas one, could be corrupted and so forth. And then, you send it back and it's like, it happened again, and in the old days, it used to go, beep, have a huge like computer beep, the whole sound and everything. And it was just so fun that like starting to send it around and having, for me, one of the big breakthroughs is, why I didn't get in 2010 and I did get in 2013 is that, especially Coinbase and BitPay were there. And I was like, wow, there's an easy to use wallet and there's a merchant thing. So I can go to the, Davi site and I can buy something and Davi can get paid and he can pay the people that he bought the thing from and all of this. I was like, wow, this is, much better than that command line thing I looked at a few years earlier. Dan, Eve, what do you think about the Lightning Network using less energy than Visa? It's just generally better, right?
Well, what's really cool about it is that Bitcoin often gets mocked because of its fees, right? But now Bitcoin is cheaper than the biggest payment systems on earth, and like by a long shot, like a huge amount. Obviously, it's not on the main layer, but the fact that it's faster, more efficient, and much cheaper than the biggest payment networks we have that's a huge a trophy to swing around, I think. And I think I must admit, so I'm totally with them in like the blissfulness, if to explain it, is the blissfulness of the era back then, right? It really was a different mindset, and I definitely agree that the hodl thing, this is just a brand, but the hodl thing is a free hat. No, but I think it's it's good to have both, right? Obviously the hodl thing gets people in, right? It's one of those things that makes people click, but it definitely was more about Bitcoin is used as a payment service. I exactly the same thing. I think it was him that said about replacing Western Union. That's how I heard of it. Like it's it's P2P. It's paying someone from around the world. It's internet money. It's the thing. Rather than it being like, this is an asset that's going to replace everything on earth. Everyone's going to sell everything they have, from Lego to postcards to gold to uranium, to get their hands on Bitcoin. So it has definitely transitioned, I think, to probably, I don't know, somewhere around like 20, I think it was reasonably like, 2017-ish, 2018, that it really started to transition into this hodl thing during that bull market of 2018. I think whilst the mindset changed from from spend Bitcoin everywhere, here's some Bitcoin, which all of us used to do, like it was Doge rain, like back in the day. Now the mindset has changed, but only because I think for a lot of us it's like, if you hadn't have done that and you'd have just been like, my precious Bitcoin, we'd all be insanely rich right now. So there's probably a bit of what's the word, animosity towards those who didn't spend it. You were part of the bunch that spent it and shared it around, and you gave Bitcoin to someone who then comes back to you, like Amin said, like, oh yeah, that Bitcoin you gave me is worth a huge amount now. So I feel good about it. I feel good that I gave out Bitcoin in the early days, and I got people hooked in and suckered in. So, and Lightning Network, it kind of exploded during that period where it was probably around early 2019, right, where the number of channels just went through the roof, and now the capacity, like the capacity, what is it? It's like 5,500 Bitcoin, which is just huge. It's like $161 million according to BitcoinVisuals.com. So that's a really cool milestone. In the hundreds of millions now locked into Lightning Network, and it shows that it's evolved like Bitcoin has. It's not like a brand new protocol now that you really can't trust. Obviously, everyone says it's still experimental, but ultimately it's reached that phase where there's a level of trust in the trustlessness, as it were. And that's brilliant. It's a great thing. It's reaching this level of maturity, and it is starting to be accepted by businesses. And if you're one of these places, like they said in Cape Verde, where they have to pay up to 8% to Visa and MasterCard, Like, that's an insane amount. Your business is losing out on huge profit when it could be accepting Lightning Network. And if you're saving 8%, then that's more than enough to accommodate for swings in price here and there. You're making that much more profit by not accepting Visa and MasterCard, let alone American Express, because they charge apparently a lot more. So yeah, hooray for Lightning.
I just want to say I think a big part of people spending it early on actually was because, like, you thought it was going to break, and you're like, well, I've got this thing and I can do something with it, and I might as well buy a fucking pizza. I might as well buy something before the whole thing implodes in on itself. There wasn't the certainty that this technology will stick around for longer. So, I recently shared a place with Marty Malmo, who's the second person ever to work on Bitcoin after Satoshi, and the dude would be, multi-billionaire had he kept his coins, but obviously didn't keep his coins. And there's always someone who spent more coins than you spent, and Bitcoin wouldn't be anywhere without people spending coins. And that's what's great about the Lightning Network, because I think part of where this HODL thing really took hold was during the scaling wars. There was a good argument from the big blockers. It was like, you can't use this as money. You can't use it as day-to-day for day-to-day money. And then the smaller blockers would be like, well, no, it's a store of value. It's not meant to be used as day-to-day money. It's supposed to store value. So then you store a large amount of value within Bitcoin. But now we can have Bitcoin on-chain, Now you have kind of the best of both worlds. So just like you say, Thomas, you have your savings account, which is your Bitcoin on-chain, stored somewhere super safe. And then you chuck some sats into your Lightning wallet, and that's the thing you go out and use to spend in your cafe, in your bar. And all those transactions for coffees aren't stored on the blockchain anymore, which is great.
I also think, Ben, there's kind of a novelty to spending Bitcoin and getting stuff. Especially, I can't think for these early people, but if you'd held it for years and it's like, oh, it has this value, and finally you could buy alpaca socks or a keychain or whatever, and you got something real for it, you're like, it does have this value. Like, I got this keychain, and it was this kind of reality proof. And as Dan was saying, it's sad, I think, that we only have two acceptable investing strategies in Bitcoin. You can HODL, which is great because you don't have to think about anything. You just hold everything. Or you can trust a guru or a system, like a chart watcher or a magic 8-ball or somebody like that. And then that, in the same way, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to take responsibility. And that's what leads you to using something by DJ Booth, the xsats.net, where you go back in time and you're like, oh, if I had bought this, but you're like, I wasn't responsible. I was following my HODL system. I was following my guru system. So I don't have to think.
That's the worst website which has ever been created. No one go anywhere near it. What's it called again? It's awful.
It's called xsats.net. And it's similar to the original website Preve that a lot of Bitcoiners use, where you can say, like, what's $10 in Bitcoin? What's $10 in Satoshis? But then there's this horrible button below there that DJ Booth has engineered from his mad laboratories in Australia. And this button lets you go back in time. So what was the price on April 8th, 2013? And it's like, oh, that $1, that was $100 now. And it'll wreck your mind. So you have to stay away from that. But both these systems are about getting so that you're not responsible. And there's a lot of other systems of religions and other things that make it where, you're not responsible for your life. Like, something else is controlling your life, alcohol or a religion or a god or a parent or a wife or somebody's controlling your life. And
the system that, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Thomas. I was just going to say the system that I'm a fan of is DCA, dollar cost average, and spend and replace. So I think if you do those things, if you like Bitcoin, you do those things, you'll live a life with very little regret. But I would just say, overall, do what feels right. But that strategy has worked for me for a while.
And I also think, like Amin was saying, you have to find this kind of middle way between never spending. And like Ben was saying, like, if I had bought in 2010, I never would have talked to any of you people. I wouldn't have went on YouTube. I would have been at home like Howard Hughes with the long fingernails and the jars of piss. And I'd be counting my Bitcoins and going, ha, 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 ha. Right. And I imagine the same for minus Marty or whatever. I don't know. But the same thing, if he had that wealth, you're not out there talking to people. You're not going to meetups and stuff. Obviously, Mad Bitcoins is not rich. I go to meetups and stuff. You could tell. But I think
It's
that
just
people
a front.
exactly. But they have to figure out kind of a moderation between that, like never traveling, save all your Bitcoin, or like waste it all on a Lambo or a Ferrari or whatever it is. There's this middle ground, and a lot of religions and things talk about that, but it's very difficult. It's not like easy to just be like, I'm middle ground now. It's a lot easier to be like all the way vegetarian, where like I never eat meat, rather than like I eat meat every once in a while. And the same thing with like smoking cigarettes. You're like, I smoke them all the time, or I smoke them every once in a while. You go right back into smoking them all the time. So it's that moderation that's hard for humans to capture. And
Can I jump in?
Go ahead, Amin. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting actually, like Ben touched on it as well. It was during the 2017-18 period where the scaling wars sort of thing was happening. The narrative changed into this store of value. So I saw like they were trying to change the narrative of Bitcoin from this thing that, if you read the white paper, it was meant to be for microtransactions and like these sort of things that people were using him for. And then they changed the narrative to like, no, it's actually a store of value. And I think that's what pissed off a lot of original Bitcoin fans, because they changed the narrative into this kind of thing that you just hold on to, and it's not for paying for coffee, and it's not for going to the restaurants and paying for food. It's actually not what it was designed for. It's a store of value, and that really pissed me off personally as well, because it's like, no, hold on,
I don't know how. I mean, it ostracized a lot of people. I don't know how much good that bit of propaganda actually did for Bitcoin, because it's like you say, it was wrong. Like,
it seems like a building block for everything that came afterwards, where the Lightning Network did provide what you wanted with the microtransactions, and we did get there because of SegWit.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
along
people,
the way they said it was a store of value.
People are clever enough to understand that you can use it as money, and currently it's not scaling very well. Like, you don't have to actually change the purpose of the technology into a store of value. Yeah, I agree.
And it was interesting because back then in Netherlands, there was a city, Arnhem. It was called the Bitcoin City, and they had like over 100 grocery stores, bars, cafes, restaurants, where you could go and pay with Bitcoin. So one of our meetups actually would be to meet there on a Wednesday, and all the Bitcoin fans would come and would go around the city and go to a bar, have a beer, then go eat some food, and like do it all with Bitcoin. And then all these people that are now like, regulation is great. Well, what regulation did was, in Netherlands, now you have to pay, I think, like 20 or 50,000 euros per year to have a Bitcoin or crypto license to be able to do that. So the business that actually did all that for free and provided the payment gateway for free so people can go and pay at all these restaurants and everything, suddenly they had to pay like, huge sums of money to be able to continue operating. So it just shut down all these real grassroots
Oh, it seems to have lost Amin, but I do think one of the problems.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So one of the good things about Bitcoin, but also a problem, is it has so many features that it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. So tell someone does payments, and they're like, "That's great," and you're like, "It also fights, online censorship." And they're like, "Oh, I like the payments better," and all these kind of things. Different people like different things, and they're all true. You pull out all the different blades of the knife; they're all there. And then you tell someone it does all those things, and they're like, that's ridiculous. No one thing could do all of those things. Like, you're making this up. So it is very difficult to explain, I think. Amin, do you have more or Dan, you want to go first, and then we'll go to Amin on the Lightning Network. But go ahead.
Well, at least now we've got the best of both worlds, right? So Bitcoin on chain is store of value, and you can still get the store of value if you're using it on Lightning Network on layer 2, but for a much cheaper transaction rate. So exactly, you said, like, you've got your savings account and your wallet, and those are two completely different things. No one ever takes their whole life savings around with them. So you've got access Bitcoin that's very easily accessible, that can be used in lots of different places and used very cheaply and ultra fast. Getting around that thing of like, when people said Bitcoin can be used for coffee, but I sent a transaction, it still hasn't been confirmed, and my coffee's gone cold. Like, you can't say that anymore because you can use Lightning. So it transacts faster than it takes to actually pour the coffee. So yeah, screw you guys.
I agree with you, Dan. No one keeps their entire savings in their checking account, so forth. A fun story, we were playing video poker at one of these machines recently, and usually they have like a top to the bet, like a max 5 or max 10. But this one had no max bet. So when you pushed max bet, it put like all $60 that you had in the machine into one hand of blackjack. So fortunately, my brother won, so he pulled out of it. But interface questions like that, you think max bet is usually 5 or 10. You push it, you got your whole savings account in there. You better win that bet or you're going to lose it all. So Amin, what did you think about the Lightning Network outpassing Visa?
Yeah, I think it's first of all, who cares what Visa is doing? I mean, if people are waiting for that kind of thing, it's just different mentality. I think it's great. I think it allows Bitcoin to be, used as something for daily purchases. I mean, I lived on crypto for over 10 years. So for me, like, if people understand how the fiat system works, they should do what I would suggest that they do whatever they can to not use it. So it's not just like we use Bitcoin because it's this cool thing, or like, it's decentralized money. It's like, screw the fiat system. Like, clean your hand of something that has caused so much devastation around the world, like caused millions of people to become homeless at some stages, caused millions of people to lose their livelihood. And so many things have happened through the fiat system. So when you have a choice, you should exercise it. It's empowerment. It's a tool of human extension in terms of freedom. So it's strange when people don't use it. And you can always buy more. Like when people are like, I can't spend my crypto, you can buy more, man. You get more. It's fine. Clean your money, your fiat, and put it into crypto, and it's all good. So I love that people can do that. And it also allows for people that host podcast shows. So there's a guy, Uri, from the Hackers Congress. You've met him, Thomas, for sure. So he has his entire podcast on a platform that you can do with Lightning Network, and that's great. So you watch, you listen to the podcast, you watch it, and you can straight away tip him and support all these artists. So it's like we did a full 360. Yeah, we were like, yeah, micropayments, no store of value, and the Lightning Network. Oh, okay, we're back to micropayment. So it's great. I love it. And screw Visa. So who cares?
It must be very frustrating for the Bcash fans who are like, we wanted micropayments the whole time, and we just circle back. But again, I think Bitcoin can be everything to everybody. It has a lot of different features. It's just which one is the most important to you. Let's move on.
Even now we've got side chains like Rootstock that you can do Ethereum smart contracts. So if that kind of thing interests you and you're like, but I just want to do it with Bitcoin. Well, now you can. Bitcoin, yeah, it's a programmable money. So I think it's just up to people to use their imaginations and think of the cool new things that they can do with it. And it's probably possible.
We have the NFTs from at least 2 or 3 different angles now, with counterparty, ordinals, stamps, liquid NFTs on a side chain. I'm
got
sure
Rootstock NFTs.
Rootstock NFTs. I'm sure I haven't seen them, but I'm sure they have them. And
they're out there.
It's great. It's a great way to spread the word about Bitcoin and to get more people in different uses of these networks. But yeah, it must be frustrating to those who are like, I want just one usage, or one usage was more important to me. And John, you kind of reminded me back. I remember Vitalik was considering putting, the Ethereum network onto Bitcoin. And that was his early first ideas. And then it became the altcoin and all the other altcoins. And it's funny to see that come back. And that's kind of what we said at the time. We're like, Bitcoin will do this. It'll just take longer. Like the security issues, getting things adopted, SegWit, things like that. It'll just take longer. And no one has any patience for that. But then if we wait long enough, you see it happens anyway. Like Bitcoin did get all these things.
I think altcoins are a high time preference activity, but there's some useful R&D going on out there.
I'll have to see how it goes.
And what's really cool is seeing these people coming back to Bitcoin as well. These great Ethereum developers, and some of them are coming back to Bitcoin to work on Bitcoin stuff. So I'm loving that, the flood of new talent we're getting in Bitcoin from it. Sorry, Tom.
And we always said we'd welcome them back, and we'd welcome Roger back, and so forth. We do welcome them back. And also Bitcoin, the currency, the protocol, the code, it doesn't care. It didn't notice you're gone, even if you wrote angry messages about it and so forth on the Medium or Twitter or whatever. Bitcoin, the protocol will be fine. You can come on back. So, all right, is everyone done? All right, I'm wait. See that big pause there? Oh, wait. All right. Moving on to issue 4 because we're running out of time. A Newton grandmother scammed out of $20,000, used Bitcoin ATMs to send the money. We've talked about this before, especially with our friend in the UK who actually has a convenience store where he's seen this happen. The lady was kept on the phone. She was told that her identity had been stolen. They were going to get her a new social security number, and they were going to help her move her money over to protect her identity. Of course, they were moving the money into their own Bitcoin wallets. The way these scams work is they keep the person on the phone the whole time. So the person's driving to the bank, the person's driving to the Bitcoin ATM. And as our friend has described in person at a convenience store, they'll keep the phone glued to their ear. Someone will say, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing with the $20,000? What are you doing with this, massive withdrawal from your bank that you're now shoving into a random machine that you've never seen before?" And these people are just kind of in a trance, and they're just intent on sending this money. And then they wake up. It said this lady sent 2 tranches of $10,000 before she went to her lawyer. She could have went to her lawyer first, then sent the money, and she could have kept it. But before, Dan, Eve, what do you think about scams like this? They're going to be more and more common. The common denominator, of course, is the Bitcoin, which cannot be canceled or easily returned.
I actually think, sadly, we haven't kind of seen peak scam yet. I think that it's a technology that, let's face it, because it's so good, it can be used to scam. And I don't think we've seen enough of it. I would have expected to have seen more kind of ransoms and things like that. Maybe it's because they're kind of played down and the institutions or whatever that are being companies that are being ransomed want to be quiet about it to protect shareholders and that side of things. But I think there's definitely, it could be abused. Sorry about the noise, my dogs are rattling around. So it could be abused a lot more. So, but when it is, it's obviously really sad to hear instances like that. Like you said about the ATM, I think it's a post office scam in the UK that was sort of going around. You also get the HMRC scam as well, and people frantically trying to withdraw money from here, there, and everywhere. And wasn't it that in the article about Ian Freeman a while back, they were saying, right, no, he was asking more questions than the banks were of people making nefarious transactions. But I think that article does make a really good point, which is they said, quote, do we really want bank tellers screening us and asking how much money, what are you going to do with it? Is it for legitimate purposes? There's, how far do you go with trying to protect people without mollycoddling and kind of asking in a patronizing way? What are you doing with your money? Why do you want to withdraw that amount of money? And let's face it, 20,000 really isn't a huge, I mean, it's a big amount of money, but it's not huge compared to what could be deemed as a big sum of money nowadays. So it's you've got to be strike a careful balance between trying to protect people and not intruding on their personal space and putting them under pressure to answer questions. Now, obviously, there's certain people that should be more protected. Like, I don't know if this is this stereotyping, but like the elderly, right? Because they new to technology could fall for certain scams more than others will, because they're kind of maybe to not say less streetwise, but then I know loads of young people that fall for absolute conkers of stories, like I did for Doquan finding having a treasure in his house, or which is probably fake. I don't know. Who knows nowadays? But yeah, it's just really sad when anyone loses money from a scam. I've lost many a penny over the years in Bitcoin scams. Probably the most I've lost value wise was when it was actually Cointelegraph promoted the fact that, and Bitcoin News promoted the fact that KNC miners were back in 2019, I think it was. And I went in on it because I thought, I trust that, it's been around multiple news sources, blah, blah, blah. And they even had setup articles about companies, a legal company that was taking over KNC miners. So I thought, they've really set up to this kind of the launch date or whatever. And then I sent multiple Bitcoin. It turned out to be completely fake. And I knew immediately after pressing the button. But anyway, anyone losing Bitcoin is bad. Maybe she needs to go and raise funds on Tallycoin.
Well,
fried chicken.
obviously, the bank should have some kind of minimal standard. Maybe no one on a cell phone should withdraw more than $10,000, something like that. But obviously, the scammers will adapt. They'll make them like hold the phone down, and the people are basically in a trance. It's like they're in an action movie now, and their heart's beating fast. And some of them, they say they've kidnapped their husbands. Other of them, it's a tax problem. In this case, they told the woman that they were going to protect her, that they're on her side, they were going to keep her money safe, and of course tragically she's sending her money away. Amin, Rafi, what do you think about these Bitcoin scams? Are they going to continue? Will they get worse?
It's been happening for a long time. I feel a lot of it, there's so many scams occurring even beyond Bitcoin. I know a friend that got scammed, I think 75,000 Australian dollars. It had nothing to do with Bitcoin. You don't see that on the newspaper or on the news media, like fiat being targeted for, but that's why they want to bring out the digital IDs and all that jazz. I think, I'm dubious of these articles, especially given the source of the article. I'm not going to take away, the person's pain having to deal with it. 20,000 might not be a lot in today's times, but for some people, that's a lot of money. That's all their life savings. So I feel for those people. At the end of the day, don't be greedy. That's what I'm going to put it at. Like, there's a karma to every action we make, and I don't want to be rude to that lady, but you should question your motives as to why you did that, without even consulting with an individual that may have a greater understanding of it. So I don't really blame the scammers. I blame the people that participate in being scammed. I know it's a two-way road. No one's forced you with a gunpoint to go and give that money to an organization. You should just, if you don't know any better, or if you're in a vulnerable position, just consult with your peers or people. Just ask questions is the first step. But if you're so blinded by greed that you're just going to go and cash out 20K and just force its way into a machine in the hopes that you're going to get back some amount that you promised, that's more on you than Bitcoin or any other technology or anything else that's going on out there. That's just my 2 satoshis. Personal responsibility is a big part of life, people.
Well, it must be a strange feeling, though, for them to use this machine they've never used before, one of these weird Bitcoin ATMs, and it just be like shoving this money into it. More money than you've ever put into a machine before. You buy a candy bar or something. It's not like this. But again, I think they're under a trance. It's a completely different state of being, and they're not thinking rationally, because obviously they should go talk to their attorney or their accountant or their best friend. If you're going to invest 20K into something, you'd be like, I should talk to my best friend first. But they can't even do that because they're like, stay on the line, sir, stay on the line. Don't hang up. The IRS is going to get you. John Light, what do you think about these scams? Is it all Bitcoin's fault by having this one-way transaction system? They kind of allow this and make it possible.
I wouldn't say it's Bitcoin's fault. Like Amin said, people have gotten scammed with fiat many times. I mean, fiat itself is kind of one giant scam. Yeah, so this isn't Bitcoin's fault. I think it's on the one hand, I think it's what's needed is education. So I think, just more people should be educated. I don't know what it takes, PSAs, just more, conversations about these things on mainstream media. Just, people being, maybe people's banks sending out, like my bank, I have a credit union, they send me, I get newsletters from them probably quarterly at this point of just like, hey, here are some scams that our customers have said are, they're getting targeted by. Look out for these kinds of things. So I think that kind of education is helpful. I've also seen at Bitcoin ATMs in my neighborhood, they actually have either signs or on the screen, you have to read in big, bold letters, Bitcoin is commonly used for scams. If you have been contacted by somebody asking whatever, don't use this machine. And you have to click a button to acknowledge that you read this message. And I think, but there's only so much you can do to try to protect people from themselves when it comes to that side of things. But I do think that more of that, just making people aware of the adversarial environment that we're in now with all of the technology that we have nowadays that's used, especially now with AI and like voice faking and you know, things like that. Like the scams are really getting next level now. And so it's just, I think, important to make people aware and yeah, to like remind people like, hey, if you get that call, like maybe, you know, sure, like you can kind of suspend disbelief for a moment and like hang up, call the IRS back, or call, you know, the Social Security Administration back on the number that you know is theirs, that's on their website or on, you know, some paperwork they've sent you, and say like, hey, did you just call me? Did you know, yeah, what's this about? And just you know, show a little bit of skepticism for these kinds of things whenever somebody calls you or contacts you asking you for money. And then on the other side, I think, you know, having these like protective measures, like if somebody like a bank is going to be a custodian of your fund, like your money, they should maybe have some like extra measures in place to protect you, or have, you know, certain things that you can opt into to say like, sure, I want to be able to withdraw maybe like up to $1,000 with no questions asked. But if it's more than that, yeah, like at least ask me what, like why I'm doing this, or maybe even if you're like if you are maybe elderly or something like that, like you can say like, hey, I want to have my significant other sign off on, you know, larger transactions, or maybe, you know, my child or my lawyer or somebody like that sign off on larger transactions, just because like I know like I'm getting older, like my understanding of technology isn't so great, or maybe I'm starting to get, you know, some dementia or something like that. Like I think having these safeguards in place that people can opt into, I think would be, you know, good to have. And we have that with Bitcoin. We have things like multi-sig, and you know, I think it would be good to have some of those things in the fiat system, because it can be just as ripe for abuse as, you know, cash or electronic cash like Bitcoin.
Well, and I think people have to see that in the right way, is not a restriction on their account or a restriction on their freedom, but a protection from these scams. Because like you're saying, John, the old guy should be able to spend $100 wherever he wants. But if he's out spending $1,000, maybe he should talk to his son first. There's also timeshares and multi-level marketing and all kinds of other things that you could get in trouble with, where if you had a little protection on your account, and sure, it could be turned off, and if you want to buy the Vitamix or whatever, they'll sell it to you. But to have that protection and to see it as a protection, also, as John was saying, I think education is the most important thing. And I should really write a book about this, but I do think we made a choice when the propaganda of World War I and II were successful, and we brought everyone home, and then we switched to advertising propaganda, where if you have too smart of an audience and they're too good at critical thinking, they see through the advertising, right? And this is a big problem. So you have to have them educated to the point where they can be valuable to society, but not educated to the point where they see through the propaganda. And this leads us to these people getting into these panic states when they pick up the phone and an authority figure tells them to stay on the line and go withdraw 20 grand and put it in this machine. That's part of success. Like they need to accept that they're supposed to be doing that for Budweiser or for you know, Goldman Sachs or whatever the correct marketing choice is, not for that guy on the phone. So there's a hole there. They also had a really interesting interview on CNN recently, and I'm not supposed to get political, but it was all these people from Fox News, and they were telling them how, you know, the Dominion lawsuit worked out and that Fox had given them incorrect information on the election, and that they recently paid $757 million about this incorrect information. And pretty much all four of these like well-educated, nice people, slightly into politics, they said, I'm going to keep watching Fox News. Like they had this big interrupt, this giant, the largest defamation case in the United States, a huge interrupt. Like maybe you should look at your actions and say, wow, you know, a moment of clarity. I've been drinking too much. You know, look at your actions. Instead, they all said, without a doubt, they're like, I am smart enough to see through propaganda. They're like, Fox could be throwing the greatest propaganda in the world at me, but I, random normal guy who hasn't studied history and so forth, am smart enough to see through it. I'm going back to the well. And it was pretty crushing and pretty tragic to see it, but that's how we are as people. We believe more in ourselves than maybe we actually have. And those critical thinking skills are the hardest things to teach, the hardest things to learn. And it's not just being opposite. Like, I believe the opposite because this is true or whatever. You actually have to do the research every time on every individual thing. And then you have to be capable of doing the research, like have a research background and not just Googling stuff. But Ben, I fear we've drifted far. What do you think about the nice old lady who was scammed at the Bitcoin ATM?
I think that the news and how people interpret the news is very interesting. I mean, a side effect to this information revolution, because you have there's a certain generation, mostly the sorts of people who will get scammed by something like this, where they grew up in a very regulated world, and they're free press in a lot of these countries, a lot of the developed countries. They could just trust there was some journalistic integrity, because they have a monopoly on press and there's an expectation there, and they could be regulated by government and so on. And of course, they've swayed one way or the other, but there was journalists did work. And then you had this information revolution, and then that same sentiment is passed across to just Joe Blogs on the YouTube video, and some old dear watches it and then believes this thing to be true or that thing to be true. And actually, normal people, just the very fact that they were programmed that this thing reporting news before had integrity, now this thing also reporting news has probably got integrity. And slowly people are learning that they need to be a little bit wiser and they need to be critical thinkers. And it's just a slow journey as the information revolution takes hold. And we're moving from that world of a regulated world to a freer world with more autonomy. And then it becomes the role of government not to regulate, but the role of government to educate. And if there is government or whatever, but government companies, whatever, it needs to educate, and education is the key. Yeah, but the news, how the news has evolved over time is a kind of interesting. And it's a shame really that you then, because what happens is with the traditional news outlets, is they then need to compete with Joe Blogs on YouTube, and they haven't got the resources to do so. So they just start saying things as well. And before you know it, you can't actually trust anything anyone says ever. And that's when you need to start doing your own journalism. So people are getting there, people are getting wiser, and this whole deal was part of that process. Everyone's been scammed at some point, and if you haven't, good, well done to you. But it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I as the rest of the panel said, I think education is key on this. It's the role of government to, if it's no longer regulating things, and to really educate people. Well, they can't regulate. If they can't regulate this certain industry, then really educate them as much as possible on things they should be looking out for.
It is interesting, Ben, how news has expanded from kind of guys on suits on your local news, guys on suits, national news, guys on suits, CNN. And then there's this kind of point where you can photocopy this guys on suits format and put a different ideology into it. And then it's not so much news and trust and this search for journalistic integrity, it's what your ideology is, and that the people perhaps trust that too much. And again, if you're using one source as your information, like, you're already in trouble. Like, you just need more sources. But we've gone on really long today, so running out of time. So let's go to Dan Eve for a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead, Dan. You're
always on the spot. I never pre-prepare for my story of the week or prediction. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go. Sadly, there's going to be a big event before the end of this year in terms of a Bitcoin ransom that will actually shake the news up. Something that's not going to be small time, but it's something that's going to be a big kind of turning point where people really start to it may even be a cascade of these events once the criminal realizes that they can extort people in such a way. But I do think, ultimately we haven't seen as many of the scams like in Bitcoins as I think we could be seeing, given it's such an incredible technology.
Everything from the past is coming back. Dan predicts the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. The 20s are here again. He wants a Bitcoin ransom this time. Amin, Rafi, do you have a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. Prediction. I see Binance being targeted I don't want it to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if Binance drops, and a push for central bank digital currencies thereafter. That's kind of a worrisome prediction that I don't hope happens. The people that know how to use non-custodial wallets and really know how to use cryptos the true way do not have anything to fear. So that's my two satoshis.
You never know when Binance is going to end up like Sheep Marketplace. They said it had great service right up until the weekend when they exit scammed. Then you just couldn't get them on the phone. John Light, prediction or story of the week. Go ahead.
Maybe a story of the week. For me, it's a big week because I'm going to be speaking at the MIT Bitcoin Expo this weekend in Cambridge. And then I'm going to be at BTC++ in Austin next weekend. Very exciting. Other than that, I've just been heads down building. So I have no idea what's going on out there in the rest of the Bitcoin world. But yeah, that's the big story of the week for me. And if anybody out there is going to be at either of those events, please come say hi. I'm always down to chat. I'm going to be presenting about my research on validity rollups on Bitcoin, which I originally published at bitcoinrollups.org, and will now be kind of giving the presentation and talk at a conference talk format. So looking forward to that.
That's great, John. Congratulations. And where can people learn more about the sovereign decentralized exchange that you guys are working on?
Sure. So the main website is sovereign.com. That's SOVRYN.com. And that's the main portal, which will take you to our community channels and of course the DEX itself. So definitely go check it out if that sounds interesting to you.
Sounds great. Sovereign.com. And Ben Ark, a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead.
Very cool. Congratulations about Bitcoins. And I very much enjoyed chatting to everyone today. And it's a big reminder as to why people should attend meetups, conferences and things. It's just great to share, words, spoken words with other Bitcoiners and throw ideas around. So I've enjoyed that very much. I want to quickly share my screen because in LNbits, we launched a SaaS. You see that? We launched a SaaS service. So now I can pay 21 sats an hour and I can launch my very own LNbits using our server. And then you can just run it. You could have an LNbits running just for a few hours for a meetup if you wanted to, or you could play around with the technology and you can install your POSs and that sort of stuff. And you can go to manage extensions here, go to all these extensions you can install into your WordPress install. Sorry, your LNbits install just like WordPress. And that's all now possible through our SaaS, which we have for the cheap price of just 21 sats an hour, and you can pay hourly as well. So pretty good way to get people to experiment with the LNbits software. Yeah, we're excited about it, and we've had a big uptake as well. People playing around with it, which is cool to see. So thank you for everyone for doing that.
So previously, Ben, you had to set up a server or a node to run LNbits. Now you can kind of rent an LNbits extension from you guys?
No. See, I mean, you could use our demo server if you want to, legend.lnbits.com, just to play around the software. And you could use someone else's LNbits server, or you could run it yourself on your own computer or VPS. It would make it easy. But there's just kind of a need for people to be able to spin up one just with a few clicks. So this actually installs a fresh LNbits install in our little Kubernetes cluster, and you get your own fresh LNbits instance, which is completely gapped from all the other instances, and you can just use it to play around with LNbits as an admin, as if you've installed the software yourself. But you can do that for just 21 sats an hour, as opposed to actually having to install the software yourself.
So it's kind of like Docker. You have a container and you can have your own LNbits instance in there. It's a bit like,
say WordPress.com, I suppose. If you can't bother to spin up WordPress yourself, then you go to WordPress.com and you can spin up WordPress, and it would, it's a bit like that.
That sounds great. And people can try it at lnbits.com.
Yeah, just go along, play around with it. Yeah.
All right. And Min, did you want to tell people what Bittopia is and what you're working on with Bitcoin education?
Thanks for opening up that channel. I felt a bit left out. I'm like, I should have, put my project on there too. Thanks for coming back around. So Bittopia came about because of everything we spoke about. It was like 10 years and I was still confused why people didn't know what Bitcoin was. And it was so interesting for me that, if it was created by the IMF or something, everyone would know what it is. So why isn't it happening with Bitcoin? So I did like a word cloud and did a kind of a survey as to why people are not using Bitcoin in the way that it was designed to be. And the number one thing was knowledge. So it confirmed my kind of hypothesis as to why people are not using it, which is lack of knowledge, education. And I also saw that the education industry, much like the financial industry, was top down, in which the end users pay their cost. The systematic risk is passed on to the end users. So in the education industry, I saw the same thing. So I wanted to flip that around and apply to do what Bitcoin did to the financial industry, to the education industry. That's where Bittopia University came about, to decentralize education and to go about like bringing about all these forms of knowledge that are hidden or censored in mainstream forms of educational institutions. So it's not just about, we're going to offer programming and all that. There's so many forms of knowledge that's just hidden in the traditional institutions you don't have access to. So we've done really well. We won a grant from the Swarm Council Foundation to develop some parts of our system to be able to reward students, incentivize the student process, to be able to have like each course its own treasury so they can fund and to be able to empower students to become entrepreneurs, not just go out and work for some Google or Facebook organization. Having that DAO system be applied to the university framework is proven to be very powerful. We partnered up with a university in Switzerland to create our DAO course together. So we're making really good progress. So right now we're just looking for grants because at the moment we don't really want to go the VC route because it changes the narrative and the principles behind which we stand. And also there's another project that came about through Bittopia University, which is called Unchained Innovations. And that's if you want to get, if you want to get rid of your CIA phones and get some Graphene OS phones or Linux laptops, things like that is another service that is provided through that organization that came about through Bittopia University. So thanks for allowing me to explain that to people.
That's great.
If you come through Mad Bitcoins or your channel,
what's the webpage? Go ahead.
So should I type it in the
Just
chat?
Tell them so they know where to go.
Yeah. So Bittopia is bittopia.org, bittopia.org, and Unchained Innovation, just unchainedinnovations.com, and that will forward you to the right place. And if you're looking for phones or laptops, just put in where you heard this, and definitely they'll look after you.
Great stuff, Amin. Thanks so much. Glad we got your plug in there. Dan, you don't have anything to plug?
No, I'm still like incognito with what I'm working on. So yeah, I can't really talk. That's about all I got to say about that. But I am going to start like writing some new content. So it's I need to start writing some tunes. Although there is always the temptation to just get it to do ChatGPT to do it for you. I gave someone an example like the other day, and in about 8 seconds, ChatGPT 4 wrote me a cover of Hotel California about being on the toilet, and it is incredible. Like, it's just amazing. It's about being stuck on the toilet and not being able to reach the toilet paper, and it's just so good. So hopefully I won't resort to using ChatGPT, and I'll use the noggin. But either way, I'm going to try and make some new content, especially for Blockchain Mallorca, because I just spoke to Chris and should be there for this year's Blockchain Mallorca days as well. So I hope to see you there.
Well, that sounds great. Would love to see some new Crypto Raptor raps. And just want to thank everybody for all the kind words about Mad Bitcoins. It's been 10 years. Seems a lot longer when you look back at it. It seems like a blink. Like, I remember yesterday, and I remember driving to San Francisco for the Bitcoin meetup and meeting people in Bitcoin, and then going to Washington, DC for the Bitcoin in the Beltway, going to Europe, meeting people all over Europe for Bitcoin. So it's been really fun. It's been work, but it was fun. I mean, editing is difficult, but when you get back into it, you're like, you get that product at the end where you're like, I'm satisfied with this edit, and that's that good feeling out of the hard work. So I have that for Mad Bitcoins. I think that good feeling out of hard work. And my general idea at the beginning was just do 5 a week, do a whole bunch of these, crank them out. And definitely that kind of watching PTI, pardon the interruption, with the sports writers yelling at each other at the end of the show, that Tony always says, he's like, well, try to do better the next time. And that was a big thing about Mad Bitcoins. And I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. If I go through some of the early episodes, like every episode, I tried to fix at least one thing. Like there were a lot of things wrong in the beginning, but by the time you got 10, 20 episodes in, you're starting to fix very small things, and your project's starting to get really tight if you're focused on it in that way. If you're repeating it, if you're like, oh, I'm going to do this again tomorrow, I better make this easier, I better streamline that. So it's a great way to get a lot of templates out, a lot of test shows. But now I'm going to watch them all. So it comes back on you in the end. But thanks to everybody for joining us. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and push subscribe down below. Until next time, bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Mad